Andromeda 500 Finals. The room was rowdy, filled with people moving large boxes and smaller ones around, dressed in the same black tracksuit, with a large spider's badge stuck to their arms. The air stood heavy and taut. It was the day they had all prepared and worked for years. It was finally within their reach, with one last obstacle. Nervous eyes glanced in the direction of the black-haired young man with his lips pressed together in concentration as he breathed slowly. He was the only one who could make their dreams come true. Jaxon Freta.
Take deep breaths, Jaxon. You've been practicing. You've beaten your own records. And some of that of the other pilots, my boy.
He slapped him on the back with excessive vigor.
You got this.
Jason looked down at the helmet in his gloved hand. His manager was right. He had won every sub-FTL race that led him to the finals. Right here, on this platform where his father has stood and raced years ago. He would show them, all of them. He would win the race his own father had failed to win, and finally be able to step out of his shadow.
Racers!
The speakers on the walls boomed, drawing the attention of everyone on his team.
5 minutes till showdown. Make your way to your ships and prepare for takeoff.
The room went dead quiet with what seemed like anxiety. It gripped them hard, to their toes. This was the one chance they had to boost their ranks from the gutters of Earth 0.71 to elites. Jaxon got up with heavy shoulders, taking a deep breath and clenching the helmet in his hand. Without a word, he walked out of the room, abandoning the stares and worried whispers that followed him out. The ship port was almost empty, with staff inspecting each ship for illegal substances and gear. The other racers huddled up together, talking in hushed tones, dressed with expensive materials and gear that Jaxon had never seen outside holograms from the news station back at home.
Oh look, it's the racer from the low-ranking Earth.
His voice didn't hold any spite or disregard, yet the blunt innocence of his truth bruised Jaxon's ego.
I saw your ship. It looks pretty good for a ship from a 0.0 planet.
Jaxon wanted to walk away and ignore his words. It was bad enough that he had been mistaken for cleanup staff twice in the 2 days he had been at this station. No one expected a human with the characteristic dark green eyes of a 0.0 planet to be a fellow racer. It hurt his pride, but it was reality.
We look forward to racing with you, friend.
Again, his voice held no malice. The 3 other racers that stood with him nodded, looking at Jaxon with expressions he couldn't understand. They were mostly from different planets as well. The red-haired girl had the blue eyes of a 0.2 planet, and Ortho had the gold eyes of a 0.4. The blue-haired and black-haired twins had brown eyes that showed a 0.1 origin.
Please enter your ships and prepare for takeoff in 1 minute.
Good luck. Give us a good show, friend.
They all boarded their spaceships, and Jaxon watched with a heavy feeling in his gut as their ships glinted with high quality and expensive maintenance. His own ship looked like a joke compared to theirs. He gritted his teeth and fixed his helmet on his head, strapping the seatbelts and turning on the engines. Jasia, his ship, roared to life energetically just as 4 other engines lit up.
The Andromeda 500 FTL Finals race will begin in 30 seconds. Please rev your engines to at least 100 C an hour.
Large holographic bleachers appeared in the large space around them, showing the viewers watching in real time. They cheered loudly, but not enough to drown out the loud sounds of 5 engines revving at 100 C.
Takeoff into 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
They were off, speeding through the heavy darkness of the galaxy, ships gleaming in multiple colors as they passed each other. There was a reason no living being was allowed on the port at takeoff. "Come on, Jaxon," he murmured, increasing the speed levels as best as he could. He had passed them all, staying in the lead. His heart raced even faster than the ship that tore through space. It was unbelievable, yet he couldn't see a single ship ahead of him on the radar. A small laugh escaped his lips, breaking his stoic expression, but it was too soon. Woohoo! A sleek gold and black ship zoomed right beside him, followed by 3 other ships right at its tail. "Give us something more, friend!" he yelled out. They had all passed him in a split second, the bright colors of their trail filling his view. He gritted his teeth. This was no time to hold back. He straightened up and began to push colors on the massive black control panel. He could feel sweat pouring down his back as he moved. The adrenaline propelled both him and his ship, and in seconds, he was catching up to their tails. He looked sideways to see a brown ship with a blue-haired pilot focused with a frown as she sped. He kicked in gear and whooshed past her and the second brown ship. The lower the point of the ship, the less effective it was. It explained why Ortho hadn't been exceeded even by Eve, the red-haired well-known pilot, as they raced nose to nose. Now, Jaxon had begun to creep up on them slowly, but surely. He was at Eve's tail, climbing even higher as much as he could.
"But you're not gonna beat us if that's the fastest you can go."
She was right. He couldn't go any faster, and Jaxon was starting to croak under the high-speed levels. As if by a miracle, he saw something move in the corner of his eye, a wormhole, most likely created by a previous race. The wildest idea started to form in his head as he steered in the direction of the small spinning circle.
"Don't even think about it. It's not safe."
Jaxon ignored him. If he could go through the wormhole, he would get to the other side, the same way the previous pilot had. It was dangerous, but he had gone through one before a while ago. He could do it. He would do anything to win. "Come on, Jaxon, show me what you can do," he muttered and tapped the control panel. He dived straight into the wormhole. It felt even more exhilarating at speeds faster than light. But something was wrong. The air was colder and the sky was quiet. He pushed the gnawing feeling in his gut away as he pushed through the darkness. The point of the negative was right in front of him, beckoning, threatening to tear him to pieces. He gripped the steering harder, pushing certain buttons that allowed for his ship to pass through that point. And he did successfully, escaping the gaping throat, and was greeted by an exit. Except that wouldn't happen. Jaxon began to quake and rattle, the engines going off and systems overloading. Jackson's eyebrows furrowed in panic, but he kept his teeth clenched and his eyes fixed on the exit. The intercom buzzed in his ears, most likely from his team or Ortho. He grabbed the helmet and yanked it off, dropping it on the floor and exhaling. The exit was even closer now, just a little more. The engines got even louder, and in a split second, he was gripping the steering as the ship descended into what looked like a bottomless gaping hole right underneath. He muttered expletives as he stressed to get the system under control. The lights were red and blinked chaotically in his eyes, almost blinding him. A suction pulled him even closer into the hole. None of the controls were working now, and he was helpless in the presence of that cavity. The ship rocked violently, the interior shaking wildly and throwing him around. He needed to put on an oxygen mask before the system shut down functions, but that would mean taking off his seatbelts in the middle of the turbulent descent. It didn't matter. He would die if the airflow went off. He quickly unsnapped each belt and stood shakily, balancing himself with the walls and struggling to make it to the nose mask at a corner of the small ship. A loud sound bounced off the walls, piercing through his ears and sending him crashing to the floor. Screaming in agony and pressing his palms to his ear, the noise wouldn't stop. Blood rolled down his ears as they continued to descend.
Oxygen flow compromised. Please evacuate ship.
Shit! He stood wobbly, nearly face-planting to the floor with how his head ached from the booming sounds. Activate backup systems!
Activating backup systems. Backup systems compromised. Please evacuate ship.
He panted heavily, managing to grab the nose mask, but just as he did, the ship turned in the air from the suction, the insides churning and spinning the ship. Jaxon held his breath, just as he slammed against the steel walls, falling to the floor just as darkness filled his vision, the bright flashing red lights and sounds numbing his senses. Jaxon felt nothing as he lost consciousness. He was not even aware of whether or not he was still alive at this point. All he knew was that it felt like he was floating. Suddenly, sharp pains pierced through him. First, it was his solar plexus. Then, the pain spread through his abdomen and crawled over to his rib. Jaxon screamed, but no sound would come out of his mouth. His eyes were dark and unseeing. There was nothing in his sight. His vision was completely blinded, and he could not feel his limbs. The pain crescendoed. The light source was bright and annoying, forcing his eyes to open and close in a squint. He could hear voices in the back, but couldn't pin down a single one. Where was he? He could remember bits and pieces of the crash, but nothing after he got off his seat to find the nose mask.
Markings on the sides. Never seen. Intricate details and designs. A danger. Get rid of.
The voices started to clear up, just as his eyes adjusted to the large light hanging from a white ceiling and stark white walls. He tried to move his limbs but failed, feeling tight straps pinning his hands down to the metal surface his back pressed against. Where was this?
We can't just get rid of him like that. This could be a breakthrough in our research. Did you see the ship he came in? Nothing like that can be made on this planet. You're about to throw away valuable knowledge and research. For fear. Get a hold of yourself. You saw his ship. You saw his clothes. That tells me everything I need to know.
He turned his tired eyes to the corner, where two female aliens stood. One with her blonde hair in thick braids and dressed in a black uniform, her muscles bulging out of her clothes and bright green eyes gleaming from dark purple skin. The other alien was much shorter than the extremely tall one standing next to her, carrying vivid red curls and fair blue skin with tiny freckles right underneath her yellow eyes. What? Who are you? His question was cut off. His tongue felt numb and his body felt like lead. His eyes rolled around in his head and his head wobbled on his neck. When his gaze fell down, he saw that he was completely naked and his skin was red, raw, and bruised. He wondered what had just happened to him. He struggled to make words again, but the lancing pain he had felt earlier shot through him and he screamed with every vestige of strength he had. His head fell back. Both green and yellow eyes fixed on him, sending chills down his back. The tall one walked to him, and he saw it. A long, darker purple tail wishing behind her as she moved. The shorter one walked behind her, stuffing her hands into the white long coat she had on.
We'll ask the questions, Pointer.
Her voice was heavy and carried more authority than the military troops that tormented his village on Earth. He knew for certain that his life would end if she wished it.
How did you get here?
The taller one watched him quietly, as if noting how he blinked, or the amount of breaths he took in a minute. Speaking of noses, theirs were flat and wide, more animal than humanoid. A wormhole? His voice cracked as if he hadn't used his throat in years. It felt dry and ached with every word. He wheezed. I was racing and I wanted to use the wormhole as a shortcut. I thought it was a space gap.
Looks like it was much more than a regular space gap. It took you galaxies from home if you ended up here.
His eyes shot to her in a crazed fashion. He was struggling to keep up, but by her words, it seemed like he had no way of going back.
We need to kill him. Aldovi!
Her face scrunched up in annoyance.
You can't expect him to stay here, Nikara.
He struggled to hold everything in his head. His body felt more useless than it had ever been. He had never heard of any of their names before. Aldivi? He struggled to form the words in his mind. He croaked. I could go back.
Until you're kind of our existence, I would rather end you in this second. You greedy humans have already taken over multiple solar systems, calling them yours, expanding your greedy reaches to Andromeda and turning it into your playground. I would be damned to let you go and bring more of your hideous kind back here.
Aldivi? He croaked. He wasn't sure of what he was doing right now. It might get him killed. But it was better that he tried something than just going out like that. Look, you don't have to kill me. I'm not going to tell anyone about this. They scoffed. No, I'm serious. Look at me. I can barely do anything. Even if you release me right now, my body doesn't feel like my body. I'm of no use to you alive. But I'm better alive than dead. Please. Nikara sighed deeply, as if used to the heavy exuberance Aldovi exuded, but her face showed that she understood the importance. Jaxon could feel more than just fear creeping up his legs. It felt like his senses were on edge when her gleaming yellow eyes focused on his.
I could erase his memory.
Aldovi and Jaxon stared at her. Aldovi with frustration, and Jaxon incredulity.
You would waste precious ammo on a human? When we could just kill him?
Not a waste, if we're using it to keep our galaxy safe. This way, his kind won't send out a search party and find their way here the same way he did. We don't know where the space gap opened. It could take weeks for it to close back.
Aldovi sighed in annoyance. She was right. It was the best way to handle it.
Even without an army, a human finds a way to shorten a ration. I'm not even surprised.
Nikara laughed, a bubbly sound that made his throat loosen up. It was pulling and had him fixing his eyes on those yellow orbs again. Aldovi walked out grumbling about why her knowledge in a human language actually proved useful in her lifetime. She would have preferred to have never used it in her whole life. Nikara grinned at him, showing yellow-looking fangs that filled her mouth. She placed a hand over his eyes as she moved, sticking a clawed finger down his throat. He felt a warm liquid slide down his dry throat and moisten it finally, leaving him both relieved and drifting into a heavy sleep.
I swear upon Grath, you have the worst ideas.
But right now, they're the best. Stop grumbling.
Today alone, I have spoken a filthy human language. And now, I am being forced to carry a human back to his ship.
The two aliens were walking under a moonless sky. Jaxon floated above them, suspended in the atmosphere by a single finger Aldovi used to hold him up. Both the aliens' flat nostrils flared as they moved, and as they walked on a grooved material, a deeper black than anything Jaxon would have known, bright bursts of static electricity arced across their heads every now and again. They were approaching Jaxon's ship. The luster from the hull seemed to illuminate everything. Aldovi stopped and turned to Nikara. She was frowning.
You fixed the human ship?
Upgraded is more like. Besides, how else is he going to escape the wormhole with the scrap he came in with.
Aldovi intentionally let Jackson's head bump against the side of the ship as she carried him. Outside, Nikara tapped on a console on her wrist. The Jacia's engines roared to life, and a small sucking noise ripping through the air as a wormhole formed in front of her. Aldovi's frown deepened. She let Jaxon fall and folded her arms.
Really? A time gap too? Why not travel down to their measly Earth and mix with them next?
Oh, you are as petty as always.
Be that as it may, a time gap is too much use of our resources.
But he won't remember ever coming here.
Nikara smirked. The Jacia's engines roared some more, belching colors. Aldovi groaned as she threw Jaxon into the ship.
Coming in first is Point Zero's racer Jaxon Freta. Coming after him in this order are Point 4 and Point 2's racers Ortho Pedal and Eve Drew. Next in line are Point 1's Aston and Santol Ritor, respectively.
The holographic crowd cheered wildly as the multicolored ships pulled into the port, the tops opening and the young pilots climbing out. Ortho and Eve laughed together as they made their way to the winner's ship.
Jaxon, Frant, just how did you appear in the lead like that? I swear, I didn't even see you pass me.
Because you were so busy trying to get ahead of me. They sniggered and joked as Jaxon pulled the helmet off with a sigh. It was beyond thrilling. His entire body trembled as if it had experienced both a space gap and a time gap at the same time. I don't know. I was so focused on winning that I just did whatever.
Yeah, but using the wormhole was epic. What if it turned out to be a time gap and not a space gap?
He furrowed his brow in confusion and laughed. They were starting to make jokes with him too. Maybe they weren't that bad. What wormhole? He laughed. I went straight ahead. I didn't use a wormhole. Ortho and Eve shared a look of confusion.
What? But you...
Move to the assembly hall for your prizes, racers. Congratulations.
Jaxon grinned as he sprinted to the exit and towards the assembly hall, where his team waited. The dull, nagging feeling at the back of his head had started to fade. He might have passed out at the wheel for a split second, but immediately he opened his eyes. He was speeding to the finish line. He pushed his thought away. He had won. That was all that mattered. Hey everyone, and thank you for joining yet another sci-fi horror story. This one was a little bit more kind of HFY, humanity, boop, yeah. So for those of you that are into that, please feel free to like it, subscribe if you really like the channel, and hit the bell if you want to be notified of more content. If you want to send me any of your stories, being more classic sci-fi or sci-fi horror, then please use the email in the description. You can also contact me there if you want to chat or collaborate as well, or if you have like voiceover requests, if you're more of a business, then please contact me there. As I said, it would be really great to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening and participating and joining and just being just being present in this story. And I hope you liked it. And if you would like any more information, as I said, let me know. But for now, thanks so much, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.